Joining us now, Syed Arikat. It's always good to have Syed on because this guy knows what he's talking about. He is one of the editors and writers of the Al-Quds daily newspaper in Israel covering Palestine. Syed, good to have you with us, sir.
Well, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, good man. All right, we got you. Now, where are you today? Are you in Washington or Israel?
No, I am in Washington.
All right, in D.C. Now, we've given a lot of coverage to this, but I was anxious to get your take on it. Yeah. And it seems like I'm the only guy in Washington that is covering this. It's not the New York Times. It's not on CNN, Fox. Nobody is covering it, which is amazing to me. Israel, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago now, passing the controversial Jewish nation-state law,
right,
and the law defining the country as a Jewish homeland, which is fine, but further marginalizing, in my judgment, 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, plus marginalizing Christians in Israel. But look, this thing passed 62 to 55, which is not a big majority, makes Hebrew the country's national language, defines the establishment of Jewish communities as being in the national interest, and it also strips Arabic of its designation as an official language, downgrading it to special status that enables its continued use within Israeli institutions. Now, those that I've had on who are in favor of this law basically said, it's been going on anyway. It's a tempest in a teapot. You're making all to do about nothing. But I don't think I am. Help me understand.
Well, first of all, you're right. I mean, nobody is really covering this with the kind of attention that they ought to. It is major. And it's major because also it has a great deal of opposition among American Jews. So Jewish Americans are opposed to this. It gnaws at Israel's democracy. It also shows that the right wing in Israel is prevailing day after day. The super nationalist right wing, and so on, and that tends to marginalize other Jewish communities throughout the world, especially the second largest Jewish community in the world, which is in the United States of America. That's one. Second, the law not only marginalizes 2 million Israeli citizens, 2 million Arabs who are Israeli citizens, or 20% of the population, but also, remember, Israel has total control over the West Bank, which has almost another 2.5 million Palestinians, control over Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, which has 300,000 Palestinians. It maintains control and besieges Gaza, which has another 2.5 million Palestinians almost. Nobody really knows the real figure, but it is almost 2.5 million. So it maintains control over a huge number of people. So it is not just 20%. It is more than 50, probably 51% of the area under the control of the Israelis. That's one. So when they say Arabic, is a special language, is not an official language, you are denying more than half of the population under your control their language. Second, when it says that that Jews only have the right to self-determination, that what they seek to do is completely deny the Palestinians any future status as a country, as a possible country, part of the two-state solution that was envisioned by the world community, by the United States, by all the world powers, by the United Nations, by everybody. It is enshrined in the partition of Palestine back in 1947. And third, Israel says, look, we don't care about the status of democracy. And in fact, those who sponsored this bill, they came out and said that clearly. They said, we don't care about democracy. What we care is about the Jewish character of the state. So in essence, what it does, it says that, given the choice between democratic and Jewish, we chose to have the Jewish character of the state rather than democratic. That, by its very nature, denies everybody else the right to equality among all citizens as in the rest of the civilized world.
So, I kind of agree with that. This is why I look at this law, and my first question is the timing of it. Obviously, in order to get this done, Netanyahu had to go to the Trump administration and get a wink or a nod or a something, right? I mean, they're not going to do this on their own without getting some kind of U.S. reaction to it, right? So that's number one. I want to get your reaction to that. And then my second thing I want to get you to comment on is, where does this leave the Jared Kushner, Greenblatt Grand Plan peace process?
Well, those are two very good points. The first one, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think any Israeli government would have done that or would have taken that step under former administrations, Republican and Democratic alike. They would not have been able to do it under George W. Bush administration, under Obama, under Clinton, under Bush the father, and so on. They would not have been able to do it simply because the United States knows very well that this, for one thing, that what they tout all along, that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, becomes a sham. That's one. Second, the United States will not be a party to basically an apartheid system that says, one group of people are better than the other group of people in simple terms and so on. So that he would not have gotten this support under former administration. So they knew that they have, with President Donald Trump, an ally who would go along with this kind of designation without much care, without much fuss, without much threat. I think under former administrations, they would have said probably, oh, wait a minute, you can't do this because, we have sort of some safety valves on or some restrictions on how we give aid, how we recognize, how we do all these things. We demand certain standards, certain humanitarian standards, human rights standards, and so on. And all this is the process of human rights standards internationally. That's one. What happens to the Kushner-Greenblatt peace plan? Well, maybe that was part of the peace plan as far as they are concerned, because the peace plan is not a peace plan. The peace plan basically is saying that this is what the Likud wants, so we are going to frame it in a peace plan. Basically, that's what it is. It advocates settlements. It advocates the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital state of the State of Israel. It does not mention the East Jerusalem as the future capital of the Palestinians. It does not adhere itself or does not commit itself to the two-state solution. It encourages settlements. It encourages the apartheid wall. It encourages all these restrictions that we say day after day after day, including disallowing of American activists from going into Israel, talking about the human rights abuses that the Israeli military conduct every day, talking about the siege of Gaza, now subject to sniping fires day after day. 155 Palestinians have been killed since March 30th. The last one is a 12-year-old just on Saturday. So this is the plan that they have. It's a plan that basically, cements, implements, and gives a green light to the settlement policy and to the Likud policy.
We're with Sayed Arikat. He is an editor and writer of Al-Quds daily newspaper in Jerusalem and covers the Palestinian situation at length. What incentive is there now for the Palestinians to come to the table? I mean, if you're President Abbas, and I guess he's got his own problems, Saeed, because he was elected for a term. It's been 13. I think he's on the way out. But right now, if you're representing the PLO and you're Abbas, what is your incentive now to come to the table? What could a peace plan be now, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, well, definitely. It is the question. It is the most important question. What did the Palestinians do and what they should do, and how would they come back to the negotiations? Remember, the Palestinians have negotiated with Israel directly since 1993, actually since 1991, at the the initiative of the George Herbert Walker Bush administration back in 1991, and former Secretary of State James Baker. They went to Madrid. They began negotiating. Then this culminated into what became to be known as the Oslo process, and they signed agreements with Israel, and they have been negotiating ever since. That process should have seen a Palestinian state 5 years after. In other words, by 1998. That never happened. What we have seen is an acceleration of land expropriations, the settlement process. The settlers grew from like 100,000 or maybe 150,000 to 600,000 today. We have seen the walls. We have seen more restrictions. We have seen the erection of 750 checkpoints, military checkpoints. We have seen the most repressive kind of occupation, colonial regime in the present time. So the Palestinians don't really have an incentive because they have given all they have given. I mean, they said that we will accept a state on 22% of our historic land, which is Palestine. So they said we accept that. We will negotiate issues that the stickler issues, the sticking issues such as the refugees. We will negotiate Jerusalem status and so on. But the Israelis all along kept, erecting these walls or slamming these walls in their faces, slamming these doors in their faces. So now you're right. There's no hope. This is the weakest the Palestinians have been. The Arabs are divided and in disarray and have their own problems to contend with and their own civil wars and all these things. And the United States have taken itself completely out of this sort of impartiality and onto Israel. So there isn't much the Palestinians can say, look, I would negotiate, because until the United States goes back to its own commitment, which is, a two-state solution. They have committed, one president after another committed themselves to the two-state solutions, and this administration has backed away from that. Unless the United States can say, look, we are going to ensure that, our recognition of East Jerusalem as the potential capital of the Palestinian state, and once that state takes place, then it becomes the capital, that the Palestinians will have real sovereign independence, maybe without a standing army or so on. That these things can be negotiated. I'm not an expert on what ought to take place in that realm, but until then, the Palestinians really have no incentive.
Right. So they're not going to come to the table. I mean, I don't know how you now have a two-state solution.
Right.
I just don't see why the Israelis would agree to that now, right? Because they're the ones that don't want this.
Right.
And, they've, as you said, they've settled 600,000 Israelis into the area that would be a separate Palestinian state.
Right.
And when I had Rabbi Mencken on Friday, his argument was that, the Palestinians had an opportunity for a second state in Gaza, and they basically destroyed the greenhouses and destroyed their own potential homeland, and that turned the Israelis off to the whole thing. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's such a shallow. I mean, it really is. Forgive me, but it's silly to respond to such an assertion. Israel still, in fact, controls Gaza. It disallows things from going in or coming out. Gazans cannot leave the Strip. It is a virtual open prison. There's by every estimate, including our own, including the United States estimate, that Gaza will collapse and it will become unlivable by 2020. It is unlivable now, and so on. People can't fish. They can't go beyond 3 miles in the sea. They can't leave. So this is to talk about Gaza and they destroy the greenhouses and all these things. Israel has occupied in 1967 Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The world has agreed. The world has agreed, including the United States of America. They have agreed in November 1967 in a UN Security Council resolution called 242, UN Security Council resolution number 242, that Israel must withdraw from territories it occupied by force. And that includes Gaza, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights, which they have not done. And they annexed East Jerusalem, they annexed the Golan Heights, they remain in the West Bank, and they are besieging Gaza. So this is disingenuous. It is duplicitous to say they tried. What is this? I mean, this is not a trial balloon. There are international laws that says, you have to withdraw from these places that you occupied by force. Not, we will see how you handle this, then, we'll look into the future. It's not that, international law is not that flexible. So to respond to that kind of analogy, which is really completely intended to mislead and deflect from the real issues, is not something that I want to indulge in. The reality of the matter is that the whole world, including many Israelis, a larger majority of Israelis want two-state solution because they know that at the end, not having a two-state solution will keep this conflict going on and on for year after year for generations to come. And they want to live in peace. They want to live side by side by the Palestinians. They encounter them every day. The Palestinians are not just going to disappear into thin air. They are there, and they don't want to continue to occupy them. So it is not true that Israelis do not want peace. Unfortunately, those prevailing Israelis in government, in the military, the settler movement, which is so powerful and gets a great deal of support from the likes of Sheldon Adelson and others and so on, they are the ones that imposing their view, their very narrow, zealot kind of view on the rest of the Israelis.
We're with Saeed Arikat. He's an editor and writer for Al-Quds daily newspaper in Jerusalem. That's also, he covers Palestine. He's in D.C., and he's their senior correspondent. Saeed, 1 minute's all I have. So what is the future of the...
Well, the future of the PLO is really very difficult because the PLO was created to be a national liberation movement. It has, through the Oslo process, it has accepted to become like an authority and, sort of draw down on its posture as a national liberation movement. And now it is in limbo because it has not been able to achieve anything for the Palestinians. All the promises that were made, they just were not achieved. So it is in a very difficult situation.
We're out of time. I want to thank Saeed Arikat from Al-Quds daily newspaper in Jerusalem. Saeed, I really appreciate your perspective. Thanks for being with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.